Oh yeah. Glitches are fun. Sometimes they make games feel more gamey, you know? In fact, I know a famous game with a lot of glitches. Secret of Mana was a SNES sensation for good reasons. It was snappy, you could play with your friends, and you could even swap weapons. You could be a sword guy or, God help you, a boomerang guy. Fun, cooperative, expressive. Mana owned, even if people incorrectly assumed the unrelated and deeply Western Secret of Evermore was like a sequel or something. Yo, they got squish.mp3 in here? Seiken densetsu, or Mana, never really made it in the West. Trials, arguably top-shelf gaming, didn't hit global consoles legally until Nintendo sold the collection in 2019. The games were more aesthetically disconnected and prone to inter-console brand image lapses than the palpably rigid identity of Pokémon or the evergreen Legend of Zelda. Never popular enough and never a singular unified experience, Mana didn't inspire the same fandom rage as Kingdom Hearts would for dabbling in fun and quirky side games, even though both IPs share Moogles, Final Fantasy DNA, and balloons. Because as we know, Kingdom Hearts is serious business. The series experimented with its gameplay in bizarre ways on withering budgets and quickly found itself scattered, atomized, fragmented. The IP was handled by various creators imparting their own interpretations of the Mana concept. Different consoles meant different audiences and expectations. There was no one clear vision of Mana. If Mana ever hit the Xbox, you can be sure it'd be fully rendered in 3D, lumpy, and loaded with farts, belches, and blood. Noted Omega flop Dawn of Mana held the distinction of last main series entry until August 2024. So yeah, that one did pretty well. Dawn of Mana was originally released in 2006. That's a legal adult length of time. People grew up not even knowing what Mana was, why it mattered, what it was saying. When Visions of Mana was announced, Koichi Ishii, Mana series creator, walked on camera in a black leather jacket because, as we know, Mana is serious business to promote the new entry.
Xbox.
Mana didn't abandon its fans in that 18-year stretch. To be clear, so many side games, mobile titles, and even full remakes were released in those years. It would be hard to call the series dormant. It's always been active, and it's always been supported by the relatively sturdy fanbase it managed to foster. Anyone who's played Mana, any of Mana, should know the games aim to capture a childlike portrait of the world, a storybook fantasy, one you can walk into with your controller, a door to nostalgia, when games were about exploration, about the adventure, and not about roaming around a sprawling, characterless void collecting stuff. It's increasingly hard to find that nowadays, and it's easy to react badly to the series when you're a cynical old bastard.
I'm Charlotte. I'm a famous beauty from Wendell.
The fact is, Charlotte sounds like that in the Trials of Mana remake because that's how she was in the original game. It's evoking nostalgia. It's a portrait of another time. Trials remake maintained its aesthetic core in every way, invited players to laugh, and they did. From the cold black thing they once called a heart, shriveled and dry as it was, from years of having to perform normalcy, years of expecting the next great 10 out of 10 video game every time, and years of bills. This is to say, if you think Mana is cringe, you're wrong. And you didn't get it. Maybe Mana wilted with the times. The gaming landscape, the soil itself is sparse and riddled with chemicals, heavy metals. The land, astroturfed. People demanded prestige gaming and cinematic experiences and hard realism, and budgets voted with their wallets. And how does Mana fit into that landscape? Exactly. If nothing else, Visions is an answer. Visions takes a risk on startup, having the player run through a short intro sequence as the quintessential Mana boy, ferrying the quintessential Mana girl through a village to escape their responsibilities. It's an important segment, at least on a first pass, and wasted space on a rerun. It establishes the setting and the consequences for not abiding by this world's rules. The most powerful thing about Visions here is the premise. Players enter a fairly familiar world, not meaningfully aesthetically divergent from what the Trials remake established. It's called KDL instead of the traditional FADL, and there's a reason for that. It's free of having to perform the plot of a video game from 1995, finding fresh fields to sow new concepts, and the vision's proposition is heavy, something worth exploring for 50-some hours. At least in the first half. Like any other entry, the world is only harmonious and thriving because the mystical energy that gives life to the land itself, mana, is maintained by a series of powerful mana elementals, each representing a different flavor of mana. Fire, water, you know the score. Only in this title, these elementals require a human sacrifice, usually chosen by the mana goddess's vassal, the fairy, and sometimes chosen directly by whatever elemental, to empower themselves enough to maintain the balance of mana.
Fairy, grant me the honor of becoming an alm. I would proudly offer my soul.
No.
Huh?
By the grace of the goddess of mana, I name you the Alm of Fire.
Val's just excited because this means he gets to travel together with Hina. Isn't that right?
Hey, how about shutting up, you little... That's right. Being an alm is about going on fun romantic adventures in the countryside until your soul is fat and full up with joy so an elemental spirit can slurp it down like a big smoothie. While the concept isn't new, human sacrifice is a time-honored tradition in plenty of human faiths. It's the first time a mana game has led with something so openly concerning. Usually we're pulling swords out of stones and going on big honking quests, or casually bip-bopping around until we figure out we're from a lineage of mana knights that must escort the mana girl to the tree. The basic premise hasn't changed, actually. You're still meant to lead a bunch of sacrifices, or alms, to their soul smoothification, but Visions of Mana creates palpable dissonance by showing how excited the chosen sacrifices are, how much of an honor it is to some of these people, to their parents. Damn, Veronica, you're the town alm this year? That's great, sweetie. Your college account? Oh, don't worry about that. I'm blowing it on crack. Going by the various reactions to the alm dubbing process, we know not everyone feels this way. Some characters are visibly afraid of becoming an alm, and others are decidedly whelmed. I want to suck your dick. I mean, soul, that's crazy. That'd be crazy. But we also know that the stakes are catastrophic. The town from the beginning falls to ruin. The alm turns to stone, having failed in her sacred duty. And now we, as main character Val, are responsible for ensuring that fate doesn't befall our own village, our parents, our girlfriend's parents, to say nothing of any of the other towns. It's a hell of a burden, and to accomplish the goal, we have to walk the girl we like, or Val likes, to her death. It's not an exaggeration to say that Visions of Mana opens a little slow, but sets up some deeply compelling drama. Will Val lose his love? How can people suffer a world like this? They're really gonna do it, aren't they? They're gonna make Val and Hina fall in love, and this disgusting fiery slug is gonna suck her back like a 7-Eleven Big Gulp. I can't take this shit, man. I can't do this no more. Intro aside, you're gonna do a lot of traditional Mana stuff during play, roaming a world, killing every last one of God's creatures, and powering up. It's all pretty expected and pretty non-committal. Visions of Mana isn't trying to haul the series into the prestige gaming space per se, and remains comfortably in the B range, with acceptable action combat, things to do, and people to see. It doesn't handle any one aspect of its core in an exceptional way, and wants you to sample from the platter. Take in the complete Vision of Mana. Mana always made a point of handing the player a world, a huge open space to travel in search of power, and sites fit to make your own lived existence look like a real piece of trash. The original Final Fantasy adventure was mostly a world and a handful of dungeons. The widely loved Secret of Mana was one of the most colorful of its time. Trials remains as the most beautiful SNES world, bar none. Legend of Mana asked players to piece the world back together. Sword of Mana was a souped-up version of the original, accounting for all of the color the series came to drape itself with. The Technicolor dreamcoat of its Legend of Mana aesthetic shift. Dawn of Mana was stage-based, but nothing short of enormous. A Mana game without its world is not a Mana game at all. Where else would they put all the mana? Visions of Mana paints sweeping, sloping vistas, stark blue skies splashed with clouds, green hills dancing with wind, an impressive breadth and verticality for a Mana game, sun-dappled sights, and even architecture fit to make you weep. I was physically floored by some of the visuals. It is the most beautiful Mana game, though there's an argument for OG Trials. and legend. This aspect of Vision's play is maybe its most successful. Whether walking, running, riding, or soaring through the world, Visions aims to aesthetically impress and takes it to the hoop. There's an obvious detail, a texture to the visuals that push it far beyond the plainly low-budget Trials remake. While not every area is equally inspiring, it creates so many ambient, picturesque moments it's hard to call the thing anything but Isono-esque. Hiro Isono is the painter responsible for Seiken Densetsu's, or Secret of Mana's, visual identity. He made intricate work that was simplistic at a glance, but challenged the viewer to linger, trace the details with their eyes, become lost in the world of the painting, daring the viewer to even for a second attempt to capture the utter grandeur of nature. That aesthetic sensibility is translated perfectly into the video game medium for maybe the first time, in a Seiken Densetsu game since the OG Trials of Mana. That's not a reach, it was a goal for the dev team. The trouble is the total lack of an on-off switch for the HUD and the eternal quest marker. Oh guiding star, direct me to the bastard who made you permanent that I might smite them with mine pump-action shotgun. Players were made to mod out the star individually, and as of the recording of this video, no HUDless Visions of Mana mod exists, meaning all of that visual artisanship, that painterly sensibility, is lost in a sea of numerical, statistical garbage you're disallowed from clearing. Yes, HUDs are often a part of the medium, but sometimes the aesthetics are greater than the visual aids. Monster Hunter knew this, and man, it's not new to run games HUDless. Can we get some cleanup crew on this shit? Oh my god. You're made to do a lot in the world. You can run and climb and all of that. Sure, suss out pathways and objectives, but Visions makes a point of littering the place with small points of interaction. That means you stop and collect mana spirits wherever they appear, battle it out with regular monsters, slay even deadlier versions of monsters, and collect their spirit stones for later use in town. You can uncover little areas, or to be blunt, timed combat challenge rooms that you mostly ignore until the endgame. The devs even went out of their way to leave golden drops of collectible honey all over the map, leading you to points of interest, begging you to stop and gander at all the time and effort that went into crafting these incredible landscapes. Except, I'm sorry. Hey guys, I don't remember popping in Banjo-Kazooie. Despite the vaguely open-world level design, scattered points of interest, collectibles, space, Visions maintains a forward momentum with its plot that's very reminiscent of other Mana entries, meaning while you're free to return at any point to past areas, you're only ever in one place for as long as the next story beat demands. You're trying to offer up the alms to the Mana Goddess, and you're keeping a pretty tight schedule, so the devs ensured players took their time, zone over zone, admiring, honeysuckling. Man, you gotta shut the fuck up. But the urgency of the plot means many stages aren't open world at all, and feel more like the Trials remake, like their open-air, contiguous dungeons. It's an interesting sort of hybrid design that allows for relaxation and plot propulsion on demand. These more linear areas tend to feature a gimmick of some kind, using the sacred mana relic, or mana vessel, relevant to whichever elemental's domain you've stumbled across. So you jump impossibly high, swim through the air in bubbles, blast through the mountains on a rocket, fly through the sky. That's just the weird grabby thing from DMC Devil May Cry, only without the red blue Simon Says gimmick. Mana vessels are mostly used in combat, actually, and only have mild mechanical utility in the overworld. But it's not that they're inspiring, it's that you, the player, the protector of the alms, and servant of the Mana Goddess, are made to master the elements, master the world, physically, to accomplish your task and even to level up. It's not genius, it's not mind-blowing, it's simple, clean, quality narrative mechanical cohesion that does more to convey the narrative through play than most of the Mana games preceding it. Secret of Mana was about whacking innocent rabbites so hard they popped. Trials of Mana is a game where your three-man goon squad violently mugs every last one of Earth's known beasts on your way to the next checkpoint. Dawn of Mana at least makes nature a part of the main character, but depressingly partially resets his arm's power level over level. Legend of Mana is basically about crafting the ultimate kill sword and one-shotting the game because the magical mana spirit instruments don't quite cut it. Was a little damage too much to ask? Visions, at the very least, makes the central thrust of the game's story known through its play. But the game isn't only concerned with nature. A very strong cultural curiosity pervades the narrative, expressed by characters, actively expressing cultural curiosity. Visions of Mana is a game where the protagonist loudly hopes he'll get to see some backwater dirtbag Hicktown's special wind dyeing technique, and does. Visions of Mana is also a game made by cops. That's right, you heard me, directors. You are the fun police. And buddy, a cab includes the fun police. Players are given the ability to double jump and air dash in the overworld. I solved an in-game puzzle by ignoring the puzzle and simply air dashing quickly enough to cross a gap, and that's good. But when I walk into town and find my characters hobbled, their jumps singular, and their air dashes stripped, I can only gaze, confounded at the directors. Why did you take my fun away? Why would you do this? Why do you hate fun? Mana always loved the world. It's a series about saving the physical manifestation of the world's life force, the font of its blood. Of course it's gonna be about the world. They even kept the funny dancing guys. They even put in a dancing gal. Has Mana gone woke? It's a wild and diverse world. Port cities, pastoral hamlets, a stunning, austere capital hewn from gleaming stone, misty isles and frozen reaches, more than one place where anthropomorphic cat people flex their bulging muscles to the delight of some subsection of the audience. An actual communist village exists. That isn't an exaggeration. I got reading through every citizen's dialogue to pull out quotes like, "Can you believe that Illistana was once ruled by an oligarchy that used a cruel caste system? Crazy, huh?" And wealth, authority, prestige, the aggressive need to move up society's ladder is the manifestation of our desire to be perceived as better than others. Based. Also, the main character can look at the camera, go, "A town without the concept of private property? That sure is weird," and leave. The game does nothing with this premise, just acknowledges that these people exist. It's interesting. I feel like when you start making pro-labor commentary in your video game, publishers usually get antsy. Of course, the world is diverse and interesting to suit Mana's love of our own actual world, but also because the party is going on an adventure, which sounds small, but understand that Mana loves ignorant, idealistic protags and globetrotting quests. It's the ultimate context for a life-affirming message. The world is wide, and people are interesting. If you knew that your life, as you've known it, was about to be cut short, wouldn't you savor every last conversation, every rose's scent, every bird's call, every last bite? Wouldn't you want your hugs to last forever and your passion for all things to burst like a geyser, unfettered and unreserved? Wouldn't you want to be utterly shaken by the beauty of the things around you so that you didn't merely live, but instead grabbed life and wrung it dry with your bare hands? And sucked it all back like a big smoothie. You can understand the elemental's thirst now, I assume. I call the premise strong because it has a resounding effect on the play. Unlike many other Mana games, this isn't a quick stage-based speedrun, but a living, undulating mass. It wants you to linger, encourages you to linger, and to help the people you meet and absorb the world in full. The extraneous stuff works because the narrative provides the strongest context possible, a life lived to the fullest. It's easier to buy into the world than it should be. It's a B game. It's not doing mind-blowing things, but it's heartfelt. Sentimental.
We are all here in order to persevere.
Okay, maybe we're getting a little too sentimental.
A part of this interwoven life that keeps the world from strife.
Absolutely excruciating. Million years gulag. It could still be a Mana game without party members, but Trials knew that customizable friends meant a more player-driven experience, and it's the right call for this particular game. One where you travel the world as a last hurrah before the great soul slurping. So, we know Val and Hina, they come from the Fire Village and don't have a lot going on, except that they're fairly unremarkable people who like each other. This describes most of the couples I've ever met. They're the quintessential Mana duo. Val's always optimistic and serves the game well, Val as the glue, the one pinning this diverse cast of mostly unhinged people together. Of course, he spends most of the first half aware he's walking a potential lover to her untimely demise, so a lot of his optimism feels not like an unrealistic behavior, as forum posters pointed out, but a necessity born from a need to perform his duty well, to act as the leader of the alms. It's a heavy burden, and quite literally, everyone is counting on him. It also serves as a coping mechanism to stomach the eventual loss of his love. I've been paying attention to coverage of the game, and I've seen enough Val is annoying, or Val is kind of a nothing character, and I am once again begging people to notice a behavior and then ask why after. Val also has a particular quirk, the unique ability to kill a monster, leaving behind a core crystal. This quirk isn't really delved into meaningfully and quickly justified late game. You just gotta accept that Val sometimes finds the physical manifestation of a monster's essence when he defeats it. When I write the story section of this video later, I'm going to have to double check whether this ability actually matters and is reasonably justified. Hina is a young woman. Hina's likes include Val, liking Val, love, loving Val.
Heya!
She helps out in combat by healing party members, only she's not directly controllable and kind of fades away into the background, which is funny because anyway, we'll be back to deal with her in the story segment. How about those other crazy little ragamuffin asses assing around? What the f is up, you absolute dementoids?
Orin is either late or lying in wait in a less frequented location. We must not linger long before leaving for Elusia Isle, lest we lose our advantage.
Does anybody in this game talk normal? Karina is the village outcast, but also the ultimate wind-dying champion, making her the perfect sacrifice for the elemental of wind. Imagine having everyone in town hate you, including your parents, including your boyfriend, who totally runs away when the spirit is picking his next meal, and who's totally gonna get with some chick when you're gone, only for this blorpy chumbo to choose you as his next hit of Soylent. Burn the world down, man. What the fuck? Karina is supposed to be a backwater hillbilly or something, so she speaks with a Kansai accent in Japanese and drawls in English.
He's dreamy. About the same age as me. Got a nice smile.
Yeah, that. She's a fiery personality who's largely guided by her feelings that seem a little too big for the small village that's had her penned up her whole life. But she's got a friend in Ramco, the baby mana beast who worms its way into all of her move lists. I want to say her story is suitably bigger than her backstory, but I don't think that's true, and she's mostly just fun to have around.
More like the Benevodon of dumbness.
Peak fiction. Morley's a cat person who had a picturesque little childhood in a Terran before his bumbling child self accidentally the entire town.
There's no way. Man, what?
And now his mother, everyone he knew, is eternally cast into the distant reaches of time while he alone searches the surrounding mountains for the mana vessel necessary to fix the enormous timepiece he knocked over and hopefully reset Eterran. Morley is quiet and precise, probably owing to the absolute tragedy his carelessness apparently caused. It's even built into his visual design. He's sleek, elegant, bro just got that bob trimmed. Damn. And his story is easily one of the most touching in the game, but that's a pretty easy hurdle. Most of the other characters aren't tragic, per se, and simply fall into the Alm role. Morley being chosen as an Alm at all feels particularly arbitrary and cruel because there's a sense his own need for atonement leads him to agree, and the lack of anyone else in Eterran, choosing to sacrifice his entire being to make up for something he couldn't possibly have been expected to help. I've been searching for this vessel my entire life. Oh, hey, I found it. What? Yeah, it was just... Really? Yeah, just over here. Incredible. I will feast upon your soul. Yes, thank you, my queen. Also, Luna was dormant after the fall of Eterran, so didn't need an Alm, but wouldn't that have disrupted the flow of mana sufficiently to kind of ruin the premise, like destroy the world a bit? Why do I ask questions of mana games? Queen Palomina of Illistana is a curious case of concerning character quirkdom.
Pardon my impertinence, but are you Queen Palomina?
What? No, I'm not.
Are you f***ing kidding me right now? Choosing to give the player the queen and not immediately hand them more money than they could ever use is a reasonable choice. She's a just ruler as far as the game is concerned and would never misappropriate funds for the sake of this quest of absolutely vital, world-preserving importance. fucking cheapskate ass. She spends most of her dialogue performing alliteration, which I think is meant to make her look kind of quirky and kind of imperious, like a well-intentioned dorkiness that stems from not really being on the level of, like, the average piss town resident or wherever these pavos blew in from, but actually has the effect of making her look like Quirk Chungus. Palomina's story mostly involves passing off her kingdom to Ian, a child, in the midst of political corruption from the merchants of the regime preceding Palomina's father, which is all to say, the game actually attempts to maintain a political subterfuge subplot to legitimize its world, which is an interesting choice. Most of the mana worlds are just kind of there, or feel transient, passing like a dream, but here, as in Sword of Mana before it, we get a deeper look into the world of KDL. Yes, the evil Chancellor looks like a grimy, rat bastard, punk-ass humiliation of a lived life, again failing as many fictional series do to not equate not conventionally attractive with evil, but it's trying. Jule is the last party member. Oh, Sproutlings are basically human now? They used to be the sperm of the Jolly Green Giant. Sproutlings were introduced in Legend of Mana and stayed there until this game. Niccolo, a character who also appears in that game, hates the Sproutlings and wants to, quote, squish them. Visions doesn't really jive with that decidedly Wild West attitude towards living creatures and reflavors Niccolo as a kindly patron instead of a greedy shit-ass merchant. You know, like the kind who can't wait for Palomina to abdicate the throne so they can seize power, yeah. Jule isn't exactly like that original Sproutling concept. He's definitely one with nature, that is, an agender plant person who would normally be tucked away like the rest of his people, only he's the sole waker among his people this particular Alm season, and he's eventually chosen as the sacrifice. I think the least of Jule because his existence isn't inherently dramatic. There's no plot, there's no what if. It's one guy from a small group of largely reclusive entities that shows up to sing and make bizarrely snide comments throughout the runtime. He's easily the meanest member of the group, and the group desperately needed some tension beyond Karina, but he's just not personally compelling.
Scaredy, scaredy kitty cat.
Are you serious? Someone screw up the localization? What? At the very least, Jule is a millennia-old child character who can help fill the party in on historical bits and talk with old mana characters like Trent.
How's it going, Shade? You're looking dusky as ever.
I don't know if I like how you said the word dusky. Break time. We're moving into combat and the story segment. Now, I'm not 100% sold on Visions. I like it okay, and I've got some things to say, but if you're a corporate glazer type, this is where you want to hop off. You know, I got this game for free, and I might not ever again, and that's fine. I've never taken a real contractual sponsorship before, not even Manscaped. You know, balls shaved? Yes or no? You can be the judge. 3 things about Visions of Mana are irrefutably true. Visions of Mana is obviously building off of the Trials of Mana remake framework. Visions of Mana received a marginally larger budget than Trials remake and exists in a world post-DMC5. Visions of Mana was partly directed by one of the game designers of Monster Hunter Generations and DMC5. This is why I have no choice but to say, through gritted teeth, that Visions of Mana, while expanding the combat framework of Trials remake, deliberately chooses to disempower the player by providing a host of decidedly loose combat options that favor no particular style of play over one another. It has to be a choice because no one with that kind of action game pedigree would make this combat framework without a very good reason. I need you to understand a few things about me. I'm a bit of an action game snob. I've played every Mana game minus some mobile titles. I love the cropped and prototypal Devil May Cry and the utterly unhinged Ninja Gaiden 2. I want to play God Hand, like, for fun. So when I see someone clout posting on Twitter talking about Visions of Mana's supposedly fire combat, while said poster simply performs a basic tap, pause, tap, scythe combo with Palomina, I won't mince words. I want to die. That makes me want to die. But I also remember the original Secret of Mana where magic was so incredibly broken, the player could effectively spam boss enemies to death. Any enemy totally stun-locked. The player utterly free from reprisal because the game was coded poorly. Visions of Mana dares to ask the question, what if a game presented as a hardcore action title like DMC5, but didn't let you effectively seize control of enemies during an air combo? What if most of your power was weighted towards lengthy cooldown abilities unless you're playing one of a handful of genuinely unbalanced classes? What if Mana Magic had long charge-up times that slowed the player to a crawl but paid off, where most melee attacks hit with the weight of a sock'em bopper? What if you got stuck in the ground thanks to a glitch and even reset the game and loaded back in and you were still stuck in the ground and nothing got you out? And no one was coming to patch the game because the studio got shut down. Which is all to say, this was deliberate. And I have to engage with it at that level because to me, it feels rough. It feels unfinished. It feels like it simply functions and doesn't lean into meaningful, cohesive strategies and wants the player to find their own version of fun, sample from the platter, and make something neat. Every time I asked a fellow player what they were running, I got a different answer, and the truth is, Visions isn't a particularly challenging game. As an action RPG, you can simply grind up and outlevel the game's hardest challenges. The true challenge for me was finding something fun to do in a fairly loose system that felt like a big jumble of stuff with a lot of restrictions. There's an additional context to my initial negativity. Trials Remake gets plenty of flack from action enjoyers for being overly simplistic, but at the very least, you can build a cohesive character and do consistent things. You roll in, unload your game plan, and it feels fun enough. Game's over in a blink and you're always active. Kevin slaps down huge melee strikes, Reese can buff your party up, Ninja Master Hawkeye spams debuffing, multi-target magic. It all works, and has the innate build-up and payoff of the CS gauge and the minigame of choosing how to expend it. The combat flows forward naturally. In Visions of Mana, you have to pick your team of 3, pick a class from 8 different options, only unlock a handful of that class tree's total possible options because you're gated from completion until the post-game. Collect a couple of odd spells and moves from investing in other classes, beat the game with your weird little amalgam characters, reset your spent points in the post-game, and try to reclaim something resembling fun. You've got to understand, my initial character class choices flat out sucked until I remembered the infamous Nightblade class, carried over from Trials, was overpowered in its previous iterations, and naturally, it was overpowered here. It's so borked, it innately dodges most attacks while perpetually slapping down piles of crits, and all on one move. Simply hold the heavy attack button until the teleport slash goes off, depress, repress, and hold again ad nauseum until any single enemy is reduced to bloody ribbons. It's the strongest class in the game, and it's not a question. It's so profoundly non-interactive and so powerful, I'm not sure how it exists except for a lack of testing, because so many of the other classes are just trash in a fight by comparison. Nothing feels nearly as powerful until you unlock the ability, post-game, to make your own builds with a fully unlocked skill tree. Oof. They really said, our story is more important than our gameplay in a Mana game. Of course, what helped me understand Visions of Mana as a choose-your-own-fun game instead of some kind of hardcore action lineage title was picking the Ninja Master. I wanted the Trials Remake character, someone who slaps and slaps and slaps down hit after hit of ninjutsu, debuffing enemies and dealing increasing damage, but I wasn't allowed this time. The Visions Ninja Master has single-target ninjutsu, the same overpowered melee attack from the Nightblade, but significantly nerfed, a close-range AoE spell, and a damage-on-contact Thunder Floater move, meaning I could teleport through enemy attacks, lay down some melee damage, pull back, throw out fireballs, teleport back in, land near a group and rip down their health with an AoE. Suddenly, though my character was weaker than the Nightblade, I was playing something interactive and interesting and kind of thoughtful, even if it wasn't consistent or best in class or even very good, so I made it myself. So Visions combat is fun, and its builds aren't always super obvious or super effective, but that weakness is just a pretext for player exploration and fun. And that's kind of beautiful. In a game where our characters, our friends, are grasping at life, at their place in the bigger picture, in the long march to oblivion. And you can tweak them in all kinds of ways with these ability seeds you get from cashing in the soul stones of slain monsters, and for completing areas and other objectives. You can play around. Mostly only in the postgame. Characters are also pretty well realized from a narrative standpoint. Valax is the Durin character from Trials, a melee-focused swordsman with a handful of utility spells, particularly buffs, to reinforce the party. He gets a longsword first, but gains access to claymores for heavier offense, leading the party by leaping into the fray, or suiting up with a lance and shield, taking on a more protector-focused role. I like this aspect of Visions more than other entries because they actually lean into character mechanically, consistently, thoughtfully. Karina is a loudmouth hothead, so of course she gets the fist weapons, the free-flowing fans, and the spear, all suitably aggressive, forward-flowing weapons tapped into the element of performance Karina embodies. She's a mix of Kevin and Reese, making her a high-utility melee bruiser. I just wish she hit a little harder with her fists. Bro, Nightblade gets to shit out infinity damage with impunity for holding one button? At least make her hit hard and give her armor and shake the screen for honestly walking into pissing range. Palomina is an oddball from a higher position than anyone else in the game, so she gets boots for stomping, a scythe for reaping, and a flail. How many games have a flail? Like Trials, but shut up. She's also the Angela of Visions, making her the strongest caster in the game, but also decidedly stronger and more diverse with melee options than, you know. Morley is the Hawkeye of the game, carrying many of his class options over directly from Trials, but he also gets access to a handful of weirdo options with the cane and straightforward melee damage with the katana. Not to mention...
Damn it, I dropped my chombo!
So yeah, if you don't run Morley, you're a heretic and I'm about to launch a crusade. I mentioned how perfection-focused Morley was, and I can't think of a better series of weapon choices and actions for that kind of character. Joulet is whimsed up, okay? Real whimsical individual here. That's why he's got a parasol and a big goofy hammer and a flower staff, all of which do weirdo things instead of raw melee because they've got to convey that Joulet doesn't really give a f***. He's a little too old for all this katana shit, yeah. Okay, sweetheart, do your precious little move there. Very nice. Anyway, flower ball. Seen from the narrative angle, accounting for the relatively low challenge minus a handful of fights, Visions of Mana wants to use combat as an expression of joy and personality. It wants you to root around and find something to care about. Not everyone is gonna get there though, and that's the real shame of the system, because it takes 40 hours to fully unlock. And that's why it sloughs off the Trials of Mana class strike gauge with its multi-tiered system and opts instead for a single CS gauge that builds up over a long time and blows it all at once in a big, flashy, beautifully animated cutscene attack that totally sells the vibe of the game, the vision of mana they're going for, but also limits what the player has to engage with during play. A simplified version used mainly for grinding mobs of enemies. Oh god. There's 99 levels, huh? Class choice comes with one free, unique button, your elemental vessel. Classes are unlocked by equipping a vessel, meaning a ninja master is tied to the gnome shovel, the Nightblade tied to the Luna hourglass, and this can be smoothed over late game where you're free to make your own class with whatever vessel you like and whatever passive skills you have unlocked, but for the actual 40-hour main game, the Nightblade is just outright broken, and partially because the vessel you need to have equipped will slow time, making its offense even more unstoppable, where the poor, shabby ninja master gets a crappy little rain of rocks. Doesn't even get to spam ninjutsu, man, Jesus Christ. Some vessels are overpowered early game. The water jar cleans up any squad of enemies in seconds and ignores the inherent weirdness of engaging in Vision's melee combat, letting you aim and shoot freely. The fire vessel is a big, lock-on, dashing haymaker that can cleanly miss enemies in a way I think is unintended, but managed to happen so many times in a row. In a single boss fight, I had to show it off. Like, yeah, it refunds instantly if it misses, but man... Are you seeing this shit? No one's gonna patch this out! The Dark Vessel lets you latch on and pull like your DMC's Nero, which totally reflavors whatever melee character you're playing when you've got the Dark Vessel. In some cases, the vessels contribute to or detract from the experience of playing their associated classes, which is so unfortunate. It should only be a plus, but in some cases it warps the experience. Vessels have decent attacks, but most of them are best used by filling up your little vessel bar, charging up the attack, and turning the battlefield into that element, letting you dash all over the place and generally letting you wreak havoc. It's just an additional damage boost to work towards, especially in late game boss fights, and generally unintrusive, helping to flatten the imbalance among vessel attacks. They also key into the narrative goal about mastering the world, the elements, to succeed as heroes of mana. I want to say something clever about enemies, but the truth is, they're the most competent versions across any of the games, except arguably Secret of Mana, where a squad of dudes could stunlock you because of, again, poorly coded recovery mechanics. They give players time to do their thing, but they've all got unique behaviors you need to mind or risk getting knocked out of your flow. You've got a long dash that helps you outmaneuver them, a double jump, and air dash options. Enemies aren't a huge concern, especially depending on your choice of character, but you at least need to engage with them within the tight circular confines of any given battle and stay active. And on top of your levels on that note too. I think bosses are pretty well done as well, at least if you're not playing Nightblade and exploding the world.
Dealing damage in many such cases.
That was crazy!
They're done up in that familiar Trials remake pseudo-MMO design with markers for incoming attacks and a need to target specific parts for maximum damage, alongside the traditional mana considerations like buffs, debuffs, and elemental weapon enhancements, but they don't get meaningfully challenging until the higher difficulties, so, for the most part, on normal mode, bosses end up being big lumbering health sacks outside of a handful.
More like the Benevodon of dumbness.
Yes, thank you, Queen. That's not a biting criticism, it's just what happens when you aren't making a hardline action genre experience, but there's always a greater challenge and there's always a higher number to achieve. You'll find your fun if you go looking. Most of the really fun bosses are post-game materials, so I'll save them for later. A lot of RPG people aren't playing Mana for the combat. I am, but Visions of Mana shows us no new visions of video game storytelling. The plot happens in cutscenes, and worse, and in profoundly undramatic moments, in screens and screens of text boxes.
Sounds like this developed.
It might.
Okay, let's hurry it up.
Here's
Okay, thank you.
Lumina's
Plenty to say today, huh?
One of the best parts of Legend of Mana was talking to someone and they'd say the most f***ass thing, like, "We've got no souls, you know." And you just have to deal with that. Visions of Mana, conversely, is a game where nobody shuts up because everyone needs a say in every conversation, even when most times it's to reaffirm or restate rather than meaningfully contributing.
The one to trust in this decision, I don't know who is. We've come this far. Now's your chance.
Change is hard. It is frightening. But do not forget why we are here. You know our answer.
All we have accomplished has led us here. Let us follow it through to the future.
Trust your instincts and it'll be all right. I know you have it in you.
Val.
Make a choice, you This is one of those stylistically abominable things Japanese video games often do because plenty of games writers are either told to force contributions or actually think these are all necessary, which is bleak. I mentioned the premise and various character backstories and motivations, etc., but I also neglected to fill in the blanks. Remember that Visions intros with Orin and Liza, who went to escape their duties as Soul Guard and Ulm. We see Liza turn to stone, cut to Val, and immediately hear about a Soul Guard from this very village. Liza, from Val, hoping to see her again on the quest. Liza was a Soul Guard and settled in another village, Guju, and became their Ulm. "Ma'am, you've got a soul so fat and juicy, I'm slurping that shit for real. This suck hella." Was he wrong, though? Val and Hina, setting out from the village, meet a traveling Orin quickly after, who does the whole, "Yeah, Soul Guard, a huge responsibility. Wouldn't it be great if there were no alms? And no one had to suffer ever again? You care about other people? I think this guy's one of those wokes." The game calls attention to Orin immediately and tells us not to trust him. He got a village destroyed. He's clearly against your quest, but he's not necessarily wrong for that. The world's faith-based strictures seem oppressive and outright evil, so maybe there's more to this Orin thing. After picking up Karina and Morley, the player meets Orin again, and he helps the player avoid suspicion and harassment from a pompous magistrate named Passar. So Orin's got an anti-establishment vibe. Awesome. Seems like his whole deal is cooler than whatever we're doing. Orin's cool dudism plummets into the sea after joining up with Palomina. He ends up luring Val and Hina with the promise of ending the cycle of alms forever with special magic, and at this point, both Val and Hina want to return to their village and live out their lives together. Orin is hope. He's also overwhelmingly suspicious, and Val has the IQ of a brick, but love makes you do stupid things. It's all a front for some kind of ritual that allows Orin to kill Hina and use Val's ability to turn her into a core stone.
Oh man, my girlfriend dispersed.
Which Orin takes because apparently the core stone of an Ulm, a physical manifestation of human life, can be used to unseal the legendary Mana Sword, I guess, which can in turn be used to unpetrify Liza. Sounds convoluted, bro. F off. Admittedly, Legend of Mana has what is likely the most adult and interesting story. The other core entries kind of lag with meaningful, non-silly stories.
Ooh, Santa!
And in that pedigree, I guess Visions isn't the worst thing ever, but it definitely feels like something from a bygone era. Only that sentiment could be read as offensive to said bygone era. Thankfully, Niccolo's here to cheer you up.
Although, it's not my place to force Mew into a mission
There's no
Mew
way
can't
this is
stomach
real.
anymore. I suppose if Mew are out of
Please.
commission, then the all
Val resolves to get it together and heads off with the goon crew in Hina's name. You pick up Jule and eventually arrive at the Mana Tree, just as Orin's using Hina's Core Stone to unseal the Mana Sword, which it does, but it actually hands it directly to the person the sword is mysteriously containing within a stone megalith. This is Delphos, an ancient hero who's been twisted by his undying grief over the loss of his lover, the blame for which he ultimately lumps on the Mana Goddess. And now he's gonna kill the world. Delphos is the villain now. Damn, Delphos really is the villain now.
Oh no! Liza! Orin!
Incredible. Bro unseals all of the Benevodons, those elemental monsters from Trials of Mana with the worst name you've ever heard. I mean, really, Benevodon. Benevolent Dawn, like Pterodon, like a dinosaur. These are not benevolent dinosaurs. I get that it's probably some kind of way to incorporate a vaguely connotationally spiritual word to these monsters, but jeez. All this in the name of restoring his partially sealed power because some guy named Chota broke up Delphos' power and sealed it within the Benevodons. And we're left to clean up the mess, while inadvertently handing D-Man all his power back. Twist villains are nothing new, and at least we've got someone suitably legendary to kill. He was in the introduction. He was a story you heard about from Orin. He's so legendary, his myth is plastered to the walls of some kind of thespian colony, Jesus Christ, who perform the legend in theatrical form yearly. By the way, there is an additional Ulm and party member, one who doesn't actually factor into gameplay. This dude, Aish. Don't laugh. Plenty of people have stupid names. Like Mealpa. It's like how white people have all these insane names for their grandparents, you know, Peepaw, Bumpa, Nana, Pee-Pee, Poo-Poo. Aish doesn't do a whole lot except help us fill in more history gaps. Look out for my cologne attack! I don't even blame you, man. Getting doused with perfume would totally suck. Okay, bit of an overreaction, bud. I'm getting the ick. The party struggles to figure out what D-Man even wants, but it really is just as simple as bro saving the world in the past and being upset that a thief killed his girl while he was away, so he's gonna burn this down. And let me tell you, cheers, bro, I'll drink to that. We should mention that the group learns about how the realms of Fadiel, which used to be 5 distinct realms, were merged into one, Kidiel, when an ancient war depleted the flow of mana. Humans drawing on too much mana as a tool to wage war, which pissed off the Benevodons who went on a rampage. Delphos was handed the Mana Sword by the goddess herself, and he killed all the Benevodons, but his lover, Cerulia, was killed off screen, driving him to seek revenge on humanity. Coda, the spirit who guards the Mana Tree, factors into this by being of Val's bloodline and helping to seal Delphos away in the past. Alms have been sacrificed in this world to sustain the sleeping Mana Goddess, whose power is tapped from preserving the merged realms and keeping Delphos pinned down until a hero, the one hero, to change the world will do that. So anyway, we wipe out the Benevodons, bop, 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 bop. Okay, now we can confront Delphos one last time. I want to say the story is more complicated than all of the weird noun juggling you'll be doing and trying to piece the history together in your head, but like you'd expect, you strike down Buddy with a sword. The wishes of the people help you kill Delphos. Bro pisses off and passes on. And finally, Val can wish for a world where alms are not required. I'm conflicted on the story of Visions. I think the premise is absolutely stellar and creates conflict from an apparent cult-like religiosity prevalent throughout the world, but this tension fades even as we lose Hina Hina. Even as we approach the mid-game, we tromp through plenty of old areas, fight the same enemies and bosses multiple times, and when we face down Deilophos, the fuse has long burnt out. We were always gonna kill the myopic world hater guy. The interesting part is that the original Soul Guard, Val, and Deilophos all shared the same pain, losing their lover, but all of them handled it differently. In Val's case, the sting is fresh and caused by his own ineptitude, and not some petty criminal like the D-Man, so I wouldn't call it the same. Mana veers up to its religious influences by championing the virtues of forgiveness, togetherness, selflessness, etc., and that's what ultimately helps rewrite the world, having the strength to be kind and care about others. I think the story might have been harder hitting if the truth of the world were explained and we simply had to lose Hina, the other alms, and maybe even ourselves, to preserve a world that might have a little corruption and villainy, might not even deserve our sacrifice, but we were made to preserve the remaining good anyway. Of course, such a scenario would call for a significantly darker world, and the worst things about it are the sacrificial alm tradition and like some greedy merchants or something. Everywhere else is cool. Everyone else is nice. It's not so bad as far as worlds go. It's an old story, but it's nice to think about. And it's not that I dislike the story, ultimately. I cried twice. I loved that Val went home and had to tell his father about the quest, and that his father expressed how much weight he was carrying. I like that Val had to apologize about Hina to her parents, and they forgave him. I like that she left him a note in case she was sacrificed and he kept on living. I like that Visions is ultimately life-affirming, that it acknowledges we all make mistakes and we can all still try to correct them, and that there's virtue in trying to, even if we still fail. Which ties in pretty well to the simplest way to make meaning out of a mana story, which is of course the ever-present environmentalist message. The fact that mana, this spiritual energy, is the earth, is all people, is all things, and that we need to preserve this force. In this kind of reading, the characters, the context, kind of fades into the background. They lose importance to the grander narrative, which might feel unsatisfying, but for a game that gets weaker from a narrative perspective as it goes on, the environmentalist angle recontextualizes the recontextualizing of the premise. It gives weight and value to the shift away from alms as a concept, says that we don't need to maintain the status quo, that there are options if only someone would take the chance. I've listened to enough anti-climate change people, the earth just goes in cycles and we just need to lie down and accept it because that's just how things are. People in my lifetime now, that Vision's more hopeful ending has a greater weight than it might otherwise have. Val dies in the post-credits scene and reunites with Hina after a long life surrounded by people from his village, though it's implied by the Japanese text he presumably never married. I like imagining a world where love is eternal. So yeah, it's a little messy and a little improbable, but we're already in the realm of mana. It's an affirmation that we're all going to have to stumble to get our happy endings. But let's talk about the post-game. Post got game. Objectively, there is game in the post. Visions of Mana isn't satisfied only selling a mana story and hands the player freedom in the post-game world. It's not all that different, minus that you're free to tackle various ruins, areas, and other combat and leveling extras, but now your elemental plot, your class progression menu, can be fully accessed after buying some items. As a reminder, the hardest challenges occur in the post-game.
What? Where? Did the game glitch?
But also, Mana didn't trust players to actually explore this menu until 30-40 hours passed, which is insane, and this is why people are modding the gating out. Trials still gated the player to some degree, but you could get your character doing their thing very early, whereas some classes and visions are hardly worth touching until the post-game. Again, I bring up the Ninja Master, but the same is true of others with incredibly important build-directing passive abilities that can, for example, turn the ninjutsu spam ninja into a real character. It just sucks because combat is so fine on its own, and it could have been juiced earlier to get players actually engaging in team building. Arguably Trials of Mana's greatest gift to the franchise that the Visions team saw fit to carry over and even replicate spiritually. This cast is in this game. effectively. Which is why Julie and I are not friends. Why repeat what Trials was going for if you're not going to do it for real until the postgame? The game is over for most players. The actual meat of the postgame is, depressingly, running back a series of bosses you already beat so you can hunt down Pissar like the dog he is. See, Pissar thinks the Mana crew are idiots for throwing their lives away when guys like himself exist, people who will actively make the world worse, which is a pretty ballsy thing to say to people armed with the unchecked power of the elements and a combined 500 pounds of steel between them. So Pissar plots to summon a sealed-away dragon. Sure, okay, except it totally backfires.
I am your master!
And I can only assume that you terminated Pissar.
Oh? Terminated? Is Gam Gam in the other room? Yeah, man, he's terminated. Like someone pulled a sawed-off shotgun up to his chest and let it rip. Bro is dead. He's splattered on the ground! His blood is mingling with the pool! The boss is actually great, actually approaching a real challenge in a game very desperate to push past what Trials Remake was doing. I think the more challenging encounters bring the thing together because it actually starts feeling like dodging. This big sloppy boo motion actually makes sense for both what you're fighting, they're enormous, and the moves they're using, which are also enormous. Otherwise, there isn't a ton to do in-game. Extraneous ruin fights, side quests, and Ares notwithstanding, but I was surprised to see New Game Plus handled so poorly as well. This is not a game you hit New Game Plus on. Not really. Things like 40 hours. It works in Trials with increasing difficulties. The game is actually designed for it, but here, you carry over everything, for the most part, only to find the world unbalanced for your old level. Hard mode or not, you just blow through everything. It's insane. Once again, modders had to go in and fix this. I'm not sure it's actually worth a New Game Plus run because there was nothing keeping me there except the promise of a game that would eventually get kinda, maybe, better than the first run. Once I was in the final stretch, of course, the real fight is the Black Rabbite, which... Yep. I totally beat that fight. I unleashed all my stratagems on the Rabbite. That's how that one went. Visions of Mana is a game that knows I played Legend of Mana. I don't know if the directors played Legend of Mana, but they should. It's pretty fun. As the latest mainline entry in a series whose previous mainline entry debuted 18 years ago, Visions is somewhat creatively hamstrung by the weight of its own history. What should the director do? Create a divergent and fresh vision of Mana to plenty of fan backlash, or gaze back and encompass the many visions of Mana? Like the Trials remake before it, Visions seeds the Legend of Mana original, Lil Cactus, into every map of the game so the player can collect rewards for bothering. I also think it's kind of profoundly evil to hide this tiny creature in so many visually dense zones. I don't know how long I'll have my eyesight, and well, Visions is a pretty funny title considering I'll be downgrading after all that. You've got the typical Mana holdovers, the enemy monsters, most of the bosses. I'm not super concerned about those kinds of repeats, even if I think they're sort of fandom pandering and basically uninteresting. We already mentioned that Niccolo makes a decidedly whitewashed appearance so as not to be unrelatable and unpleasant.
You're already on your way!
And yet he succeeds in being that anyway. I couldn't possibly complain about the elementals who appear in every game, or even the creature that watches over the mana tree, also from Legend of Mana.
Extinguish the bane that threatens to
There's no way we're doing puzzles for 5-year-olds.
This one's impossible. What should we do?
Correct! You are not too dumb to live.
The series always reuses elements and designs some subset of the audience probably cheered when Vuskov popped out to ferry you over the seas and Flammy himself returned from way back when to fly you wherever you like, but to include someone as historically respected but otherwise irrelevant as Watts. To include someone as minor as Von Boyage, the cannon guy. Yo, shit, we got Bon Voyage in this. Mamma mia! Yo! Y'all ready to blast? Y'all ready to get up in the cannon and blast? Actually, you can't get inside of a cannon at any point. Bon Voyage Why are you here? It's an impossible situation. You've called Koichi Ishii on to consult, and you're tasked with handling the future of the franchise. You don't want to overstep, but you want to leave your mark, so you do, but safely, making sure every fan knows they're loved and appreciated, and that's great. But I'm gonna need you to change the title to Best of Every Mana Game instead of presuming to paint any kind of vision of Mana. The combat is okay at best, and that's the core shakeup. I'm a Mana fan. I don't need my handheld. I don't need to see every one of the characters I like. They're constantly shifting. The games are constantly shifting. And if I did need those things, I'd be asking where the Cockney teapot is. You have to have the courage to make it your own. Of course, maybe this has nothing to do with the directors. Maybe Square demanded a requisite number of familiar faces pop up to more thoroughly align with, quote, brand identity. You know, make brand identity into a quota. These are, of course, the best of terms to invoke when discussing a creative work. I have no misgivings or fears or complaints of any kind. I clap when I see familiar. More slop, please! Visions of Mana invites the kinds of critiques it's received. Regardless of its scores, it stands as an official Square Enix update to one of its long-standing IPs, shuffled off to another studio whose real financiers pulled out instantaneously, the very day of launch, not because the sales were bad yet, but because they were reprioritizing their investiture in console game developers from Japan to instead refocus on mobile games, presumably because of greater chances to monetize. Square as well is reprioritizing towards slowly developed, big-budget AAA titles that always do kind of okay instead of allowing for the flops and misses. They're deprioritizing the B game. And that's more or less the ultimate context to explain where I stand on Visions. I don't personally adore Visions of Mana. I like it okay. I could see myself running Trials, the Trials remake, or Legend of Mana, even Dawn of Mana for a laugh, basically any year because of their decadence and their commitment to some kind of Mana identity. I don't think they're equally interesting. I don't think they're equally fun, but they have something to say, some goal, and accomplish that. All of them have frustrating issues. Trials has actually unprogrammed character stats. The Trials remake is arguably one of the easiest Mana games ever produced. Legend is weird, obtuse, and confusing. Dawn is Dawn. This is the last thing you see before you die. They're also all mostly B games, maybe minus OG Trials. They all have a unique property they care about most: physical interaction with the world, a fun choose-your-own-adventure, team building, and a Lego-like Mana story experience. And they're all memorable for caring about those things. Visions of Mana cares that you play it for a good long time. Visions of Mana cares about Isono and the world of Mana and all of Mana history. Visions of Mana is also afraid to be anything other than Mana, to meaningfully create its own version of Mana, and merely retreads the pre-existing Visions, only with vertical combat options so it seems fresh. Well, you can't knock a Devil May Cry dev for trying what they know best. I just don't believe in this Vision of Mana, even if I might believe in another, worse one. Would Legend of Mana have happened at all with its foundational additions, its total aesthetic shift, if it were created with a need for hardline artistic deference to its roots? At the same time, I feel like I need to stand for the B games, and it sucks that I can't this time, at such a critical point when the lesser titles, or at least to the money people, are being assailed conceptually. Games shouldn't all be prestige experiences. There needs to be room for the bargain bin title, the weird thing I found that turned into my favorite, or else the world is all man-dude, gun-shoot, $50 billion budget, or ultimate crossover guys, or beautiful boys 60-hour adventure. Otherwise, there are no Steambot Chronicles or Nights in the Nightmares or Twooies, and that world is a trash world. A world without a dissemination of talent, without attempts and failures, with only coin-propelled dreadnoughts, focus tested to maximum 4-quadrant appeal, and only sometimes challenging material, but never said in a way that could make anyone uncomfortable, make them feel something new. I partly fell out of current games the way a lot of people fall out of modern releases, and it's the torrent, the deluge of expensive, time-consuming monoliths you're compelled to engage with to be present in the conversation. But rifling through so many, so often, you never take the time to find what's worth appreciating about the experience. 2 new games this week. Longtime fan of this one, but the other one looks better. How much time do I even have? How much money do I have? How am I supposed to fit this all in? Do I need to access the online features for this or that? And do I need to play things beforehand to make sure I'm ready? Games, be great or not, blow in and blow out, time after time. 7, 8, 9 out of 10, and that's supposed to mean something. I think the reason YouTubers and other commentators for games make money and suck up attention is that people are looking for the news, but also meaning from what they're experiencing so fast and so often. And those commentators are contextualizers, people who make the play feel like it's meaningful beyond the raw experience, add that critical worth to a hobby that can feel like a consumption treadmill. But it's the AAA games that contribute the most. They're the big guns, mandatory experiences, the ones all your friends are talking about that you're about to miss out on. Does my experience matter if no one is around to hear about it? Can someone's viewpoint be right if I can't confirm? I've never cared to be part of the current conversation like it matters. I've made a competitive sport of not playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, the remake of my self-described favorite game. Because I worry now that any AAA game isn't going to matter when I play it. The next big AAA game isn't going to strike me in the middle of the day with a pang of realization that there will never be another TWUI, Steambot, Knights, Ninja Gaiden 2 Vanilla specifically. It's the B games that make people everywhere not just fall in love with gaming, but obsess over games. It's those rougher adventures that people remember and cling to the most. And I'm sitting here trying to pull something of value out of this game that I only like okay, because I don't want it to just be more proof that the B game concept is a dying concept. But it's kind of a planned collapse. No one is coming to patch in additional features or patch out the bugs. Those people all lost their jobs. The thing was deemed a failure before sales numbers had a chance to roll in. And the concept is profoundly safe. It did not try to tread new ground. It told us what we already basically knew about the series. Lacking a real palpable identity, Visions of Mana is a shrouded experience. With the closure of Studio Oka, Visions of Mana became the game that vanished overnight. In an industry moving away from anything less than the very greatest, good video games, unique video games, are rapidly becoming the games that disappeared. Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welch, Air Pirate Sid, Acropolon, Alfred Coria, All the Singularities, Alpha 42, Andrew Redacted, Angel Rivera, Anthony, Aaron, Arschwasser, Ashley, my wife, my darling. I asked KBash to make you smile. Also, hi, Merrick, Azrael, Azura, Axin8, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Ben M, Beguile, Big Papa Spray, Blink Against the Machine, Wargle Hargle, Blossom Dante, Bohop, Boom Dead, BH Operator, Born in Shadow, Brandon S, Brendan Hesse, British Gooch, Cal, Cajun Lady, Pixar, Can I Cuss on Here? C-Dub, Catgirls Are Real, Caesar T, Hero Hero, Cloric Fuck, Cordit, Chris Bromo, Cody Golden, Comfy Moogle, Cookie Bug, Couch Moba, Crabmonger, Fish Finagler, Crashgers, Crater, Chris BJ, Mono 19D, CW Glassworks, Denny Pango, Danky Stag, Swaggy David Bag, Castillo, Dara, Dash Granny, Decode, Deadword, Dead, Destrega, Dingus Bat, Doodle Flu, Doug Prince, DJ, Professor K, Dr. Cullen PhD, The Protagonist, Elias, Elpio, Elsa, Emperor Pickle, Empty Tenshi, Eric Monticello, Excalibur Shines, Gnar, Fail Knight, Fozillion, Forte Noir, Fupa Saiyan, Frog Vorbis, Garen Guaranteed, Gato Nero, Gigglebite, Glasses Kohai, Glyph Seeker, Nine Cat, Gobo Bobo, Goose 6112, Gray, The Darkest Black, Corey, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Archive, Heeman, Game & Station, Hermit J, Pixie, Honey Mutt, Horn Tiger, How do you know? Huey.
I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods!
I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer. Inferno galore. Ingenious Cloud. IOBG. I punched a sandwich. It's not bad. that.
It's time to sue.
It's not good.
Ivy Ruth Langley.
Jack Hydra.
Jacob.
Jalopy.
James.
Jank Dankins.
Jason Lasky.
Jaden. James Vaughn.
Jay Drito.
JL Savarus.
Jay Deus. JK Hedgehog.
John Poe the Joker.
Jordan Joyner.
Jorzy Burden.
Juicy Frost.
Julian My Julian.
June.
Kai Zeta Slow.
K Chan. KBash's best K. Keegan Too Cool.
Keith the Thief.
Kata Snap.
King Kuma.
Keith.
Kenite Pike.
Clock.
K-Noe.
Cone 2020.
Kraden.
Crazy Dark Chocolate. Ice.
Kyle.
Kyle.
Not that Kyle.
KZ Excellent.
Lady Weeb.
Laundry Mom.
Lego Sid.
Lethal Nibbles.
Linkle.
Little Big Trouble.
Loathsome Dung Eater.
Low Fat Moger. Lucas Boyd.
Blood Mac James.
Lunati.
Magic Meows.
Mama Rollin.
Manapool.
Manic Pixie Space Pirate.
Mara Ganger.
Hercules.
Marcus Rambles.
Maxwell B.
Maximum Dong.
Meaty Smash.
Maple Puppet.
Mega Boy E Nasty.
Metal Gear Gaseous.
Michelle Citrano. Mike DeVere. Mikusagi.
Moa.
Bobby Dobby. Big Titty Gok GF Queen. Monochrome Only.
Monochrome Rainbow.
Morgana Black.
Modi.
Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoink Bomb.
Nyrenew.
Nito Torpedo.
Neon Dwarf.
Nifty Rex.
Not Nobel.
Nuggy.
Old Bogle.
Old Man Cranberry.
Omni Nerd Zero.
Only LK.
The Plant.
Oscar.
Paperland.
PBK.
Pandemic Cowboy.
Pelagic
Undulation.
PK Gaming.
E-Mike.
Popular Hitman.
Prismatic Dan.
Pringle Prongle. Pringle Prongle.
Probably not Grady.
Project Darklight.
Punch Fighter Champion.
Ponosaurus Rex. Quasar McDougal. Quillworth.
Raging Ataraxia.
Real Beans. Reggie Rodriguez.
Renteca Bond.
Ringed Relay.
Roy Londo.
RP Gamer.
Ryan Michel.
Ryan Maury Brooks.
Saigon Man.
Salsa. Salty Smasher.
Gabrius.
Scribe Slendy.
Sakai no Award.
Sensual Coder.
Saphirium.
Sexy Bionicle GF.
Josh.
Nintendo.
Shut up, Wesley.
Silver Bear 909.
Sin.
God!
Sir Doodles a lot.
Sir Newt Newt.
Sir Slurps a lot.
Skyward Lead.
Sleepy Wabbit.
Snart. Small Turtle House.
So Zeta Dad.
Sock'em Bopper.
Suckdolager.
Space Lizard.
Spider Dad.
Squidget. Squishword.
Star Night Sky.
Storm Strider and the House of Storm.
Streffin Battles. Super Dingus.
Super Sandwich Guy.
Taya Toxin.
Shorn Chubbington. Terrence Swift.
The Big Bubby.
The Clown Prince of Cringe.
The Digital Dutchman.
The Good Lord has blessed me. Hallelujah. The Green Loki.
The Crispy Boy.
The Peacemaker Pyro.
The Salt Knight.
The Nomad.
The Real McCoy.
The Toasted One.
Big Dick Mystic.
Fresh. Rips Heart.
Tiggles McGuffin.
Tim Lobster.
Timid the Writer.
Tony Jones. The Legend.
Total Play.
Travis Edwards.
Twiddle Chungus.
Ty Guy 9001.
Type A Grapefruit.
Vid. Vacant Plaza.
Valenrist.
Venom. Vice Pup.
Video Gore.
Vic.
Joaquin, get right in my bag.
Raposa.
We are so KBash.
Weed Trash.
Waylon.
Where am I? Help.
Widgie.
Winter Solstice.
Wood TV.
Wrenchim. Zanny Tanner.
Travius.
Your boy Flyers.
Yero 12.
Yashichi.
Yay Kundo.
Your mom, Winky Face.
Zachary Livesey.
Zachary V.
Zanasso.
Zane the Impure.
Zane the Pure.
Zed Slayer Gamer.
Zero Zalazar.
Zenova.
Cyberbunk. If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.